Morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this budget workshop for the fiscal year 2026-2027 budget. Madam Clerk, would you run us through a roll call, please?
Supervisor Letman? I do see him on Teams. Supervisor Borelli? He is also on Teams. Supervisor Martin?
Here.
Supervisor Gold?
Here.
And Chairman Lingenfelter?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to our
Chair, this is Rich Letman online, but the audio is breaking up from your end.
Manager Straw, thank you.
Thank you. I just had a few introductory remarks that I'd like to start off the discussion with, and then I will turn it over to our CFO at that point. Today's discussion is a culmination of months of work by staff and elected officials to present a budget that could best be characterized as a maintenance budget. I'd like to thank the finance staff, the county staff, management team members, and elected officials for their input and efforts to recommend and enter into a dialogue to understand the operational challenges and needs of the county. As part of the recommended budget, compromises had to be made to arrive at the proposal that's presented today. These compromises were not undertaken without considerable discussion and exploration as to the impacts to address service needs. Not all needs could be met with existing revenue structure, and there's a general concern not to overextend future expenditures without specific revenue option. A couple general points about the budget itself. The budget is balanced as proposed using undesignated reserves. Not every request was presented was included in the proposed budget due to limited financial resources. The county has a structural imbalance between revenues and expenditures. The recurring expenditures are higher than the recurring revenues. And addressing this difference through utilization of reserves generated through vacant.
We have poor audio on this end.
Is not.
Yeah, same here.
The opportunity to sweep the library reserve to help balance the budget will not be available in future years without compromising the library's reserve balance. The revenue sources of the county are not diversified. The reliance on property taxes and state shared sales tax put the county at risk during an economic downturn. The state shared sales tax is not guaranteed and could be withheld by the state at some future date. Vacant positions, for example, the budgeted and unspent funds remain in the budget due to positions going unfilled, which is returned to the budget as surplus and funds reserves. Positions that require specialized training are the most difficult to fill, and a number of them remain unfilled today. Vacancies strain the existing workforce and limit service delivery options. A review of compensation to determine competitiveness could be considered, but there must be a funding resource available to implement any recommendations, and that funding is currently not available. The county is losing employees to other agencies that have more resources due to their revenue diversity. Positions are recommended for reclassification to retain employees in hard-to-fill positions. The utilization of budget reserves creates significant strain, and we wanted to make sure that we explored that. Revenues being used takes multiple budgets to recover these recurring expenses. Withdrawals have immediate impact, and restoring the funds can be a multi-year effort, even with the availability of resources in a deliberate effort to rebuild over time that is required. It would require, I guess, a concentrated effort to replace those over time, even though it's easy to use those at one time. The county is using resources to balance the budget in a good economy. Due to the lack of diversified revenue streams, we do not believe reserve levels are adequate to weather an economic downturn or a prolonged operational cost increases of materials. Infrastructure needs and expenses continue to expand, and without adequate funding, projects are scaled back. Using reserves for one-time expenses can only be on a limited basis and is only sound fiscal policy when they're relied on a one-time basis and not used to make up annual shortfalls. The service demands and maintenance the service demands and mandated services continue to grow and are utilized more and more to have a more prolonged impact on general fund. So it's taken more of a portion of the general fund. Commodity expenses continue to grow beyond revenue growth. Multi-year deferral of non-critical purchases have caused an increase in expenses when the purchase becomes on a critical path. Initiatives are limited to only sustainability levels and are not flexible enough to address long-term needs. The county does not have the revenue diversity to sustain an economic downturn, as mentioned before, nor the ability to absorb expenses beyond small incremental changes. The Board of Supervisors has positioned the county well in terms of comparable tax rates to other counties. The county has the lowest spending in terms of expenditure limits at 49.5% compared to the next lowest at 59%. And the county is only utilizing 80% of its fiscal year 27 maximum primary levy limit. So those are the good things that the board has done. But with that, I would turn it over to our CFO at this point to lead his opening remarks and lead us through the presentation.
Thank you, Manager Straw. Good morning, Director Mournier.
Good morning, Chairman Lingenfelter, board members, county manager, staff, elected officials. I just want to start off by thanking my budget staff, Sonia, Judy, and Don. Their efforts every year are substantial, and they really are the true heroes in this process. Big thanks also to all of the management team and their staff that contributed. Their work is critical as well. This morning's budget workshop is my fourth as the county's CFO. My message to you this morning is similar to last year. I'm just going to echo a lot of the things that Manager Straw has said. Mojave County continues to face a structural budget deficit. Recurring expenses continue to exceed the county's recurring revenues. This is despite growth in property values and year-over-year increases in our share of state-shared sales tax revenues. The county's expenses continue to rise for a number of reasons. Ongoing cost increases for staffing, materials, and services. While inflation has slowed over the last 24 months, that does not return prices to former levels for most goods and services. It simply means that the costs are now increasing more slowly. The county continues to grow. As population climbs, demand for county services rises proportionally. More people mean more permit requests, more telephone calls to be answered, more emergency and non-emergency calls to our sheriff's department, more cases to be prosecuted. In FY26, we saw the creation of a new Superior Court Division 8, a new judge, new court commissioners, and the additional supporting staff, equipment, and materials required to enable that Division 8 to function. The county has a revenue problem, not a spending problem. Mojave County has experienced substantial budgetary savings over the last several years, but those come primarily from vacancy savings, which exact a heavy toll on existing county staff. As mentioned before, the workload continues to increase, and every vacant position is justified and needed. The longer these positions remain unfilled, the longer existing employees will need to continue to do more with less. This is not sustainable long term, and it leads to higher levels of turnover and lower levels of employee morale. Additional diversified revenues are needed. Economic cycles are very real. When the next downturn comes, our surplus fund balance could quickly run out as property values and related tax revenues decline. When the state experiences budget shortfalls, the first place they look is to the counties. We can expect sweeps and cuts to the level of support that we receive from the state. Relying on our fund surplus to cover the costs of recurring expenses is inadvisable. Understanding that the current board is unlikely to generate additional revenues, the budget as presented attempts to balance the growing needs of the county at the lowest possible cost. Many budget requests were flat out denied or scaled back significantly. That does not diminish the need. The FY27 budget also includes early repayment of an internal loan that the general fund took from the landfill fund. This will decrease expenses in future years and save the county close to $1 million in interest over the next 8 years. With these facts in mind, I will now walk you through the proposed FY27 budget. And this will be a similar format to prior years. So we're going to do a quick recap of where we're at in the current year's budget, an overview of next year. I will walk the board members through the budget initiatives department by department, and then we'll talk about next year's revenues and expenses, do a summary, and then open it up for our elected officials to speak and for discussion.
Director Morney, and if I could just pause right there, there's a note on my agenda that says this meeting was not noticed for public comments and that they'll have an opportunity to speak at the June 1st meeting.
Thank you, Chairman Lingenfelter, for that clarification. So for a current year, FY26, our projections are that at June 30th, compared to budget, we will be just over $12 million net positive. That slide is broken down into revenue on top, expenses on the bottom. You can see that we've had, or projecting property taxes, the auto lieu, and state sales taxes to come in above what was budgeted. And on the expense side, roughly 50% of that $12 million net positive is due to vacancy savings. And so as I mentioned before, that's, that's a good thing for the fund balance, but it does come at the cost of the current employees. To recap a couple of things. One highlight from our clerk of the board and our treasurer's office working together, the 2026 deed sale. This was the second year in a row that they sold almost every single parcel that was offered at auction. And it's the second year in a row that the deed sale generated over $1.5 million in general fund revenues. So big thank you to everyone involved there. There's also significant efforts on the part of the recorder's staff and the assessor's staff as well, getting all of the documents that are generated out of that process processed and into the system. A quick recap of capital improvement projects around the county. You can see that the sheriff's final of 3 new substations was completed in February. The Reach Out Reentry Center, that's that building that went up next to our detention center, that is estimated for move-in later this month. And then we also have the Law and Justice Center Phase 2A, otherwise referred to as our courthouse annex. That should be done before the end of the year. And the Law and Justice Center Phase 2B, which is the historic courthouse remodel, that construction began last month. Looking ahead to next year, we expect the Legal Services Center to be completed early in FY27. Morgue construction should be starting late this summer, and the District 3 office suite, that should be completed prior to the end of next fiscal year. Manager Strahl mentioned the expenditure limitation in his opening remarks. This graphic just shows visually what Manager Strahl referred to. We are the lowest of all 15 counties in relation to our expenditure limit, which basically is just, the cost of doing business. There's a formula that the state came up with and basically says for a county our size, here's the amount of money it should be expected to cost to run the county. We're doing it for roughly half of that. Looking ahead to next year, we have challenges and opportunities ahead of us, but I will just say that the end of the year fund balance is still projected to exceed our target balance. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And the board does have some options in front of it for what to do with a piece of that surplus fund balance. And I'll be giving some suggestions there for future infrastructure and technology needs. With the legislature being currently in session, we're always keeping an eye on the state's budget process. And a big piece of that is the Finance Advisory Committee. They are meeting tomorrow, and so I'm eagerly looking forward to see what comes out of that meeting. But I will say state shared revenues through the end of February was about 3.1% growth. And good news for us is that probation salaries, it is being contemplated for ongoing funding beginning in FY27. This has been a topic of discussion for several years, and the state has funded it with one-time revenues, ARPA revenues. So hopefully they will get it across the finish line this year so that the state consistently funds their portion of probation salaries. As far as legislative issues, and I'm going to classify all of these as unfunded mandates from the state to the county. There's a couple that we are keeping an eye on. Sorry, this slide does have one typo. It's not Senate bill, it's House Bill 2265, but that is expected to be about $150,000 impact to our IDS budget. That basically will prohibit the court from assessing fees relating to the appointment of a public defender or court-appointed counsel. It's basically limiting the county's ability to generate fee revenue in the courts. And so $150,000 impact. There's also SB 1170. We don't have a hard number on the budget impact on this, but it would be substantial. This would mandate second autopsies for cases of a minor death where that death is attributed to a drug overdose. And then very recently, within the last couple of weeks, we got word that there's potential, it's almost a certainty, of a cut for 911 state funding. It's a 35% cut, so we'll get about 65% funding compared to the current year. That's estimated to be another $175,000 that the general fund will have to pick up. As far as staffing goes, recruitment and retention continues to be a big issue for the county. So we do have a number of kind of broad sweeping initiatives included in the budget. One, the board is aware of. You've had many discussions with our county attorney's office and our legal defense departments. The board recently approved some recruitment incentives, $10,000 hiring bonus, in the current year to be paid out of salary savings, and so we're just going to ask the board approve that to continue in FY27.
Locked up.
Again, being funded out of salary savings from those departments. Also, we are proposing a revision to the county's floating holiday policy. This basically will give more flexibilities to employees. They'll be able to use their one-day floating holiday at any time during the year as long as they have their department's approval that it's not going to interrupt workflow. And so both of those initiatives truly come at no additional cost in the FY27 budget. It's just changing, utilizing some of those vacancy savings for the recruitment incentives, and then just changing how we handle administratively that floating holiday benefit. Also included in the budget is the continued performance-based pay that the board approved a number of years ago. And just for the benefit of anyone else listening, this is as long as employees receive a satisfactory annual evaluation, they qualify for a 3% merit increase each year. This has done a lot for recruitment and retention. It does provide kind of a clear career path for growth for employees when they come to the county, and so we have found it valuable and would ask that the board continue to fund that initiative. Also, PTO buyback. The general fund piece of this will be $425,000 next year. You have some current stats from last year and this year. Growth in the utilization of PTO buyback seems to have stabilized somewhat. This was the third year that it was offered, and I'll just point out a couple of things here, that 50% of employees that participated chose to participate at the maximum level. These were typically employees that have long tenure with the county. They have high PTO accrual rates. A lot of them work in very busy departments where they struggle to take enough time off that they won't lose PTO at the end of the year, and so this ensures, or at least minimizes, the amount of PTO that they would potentially lose that they're unable to carry over from year to year. This has been overwhelmingly positive feedback that we've received from employees related to PTO buyback. And then as far as our employee benefits trusts, should be no surprise that healthcare costs continue to trend upward. The FY27 budget does include a couple of changes. Similar to prior years, there will be a premium rate increase. It will be split 50-50 between employees and the county. The county is still shouldering the lion's share of the healthcare costs. It's just that this year-over-year increase will be split 50-50 between the county and the employees. And then the trust is also rolling out an opt-out incentive plan, and this basically enables certain employees that qualify to opt out of participating in the county's insurance plan, and in lieu of that, they will receive a small stipend in their paycheck. Now, I will try and move through the next bunch of slides fairly quickly. If there are questions on any of these budget initiatives, feel free to interrupt me. I'll do my best to answer any questions, but if it's really down in the weeds, I may need to call on the department heads to come up and speak to their individual initiatives or requests. Just a reminder, when we set out on the FY27 budget process, the directive to departments was to really do everything that they can to continue to manage their expenses. We provided a 5-year average expense for each budget line item and asked departments to do everything that they could to stay at or below that 5-year average, and really to try and present budget initiatives that were budget neutral, if at all possible. We received about $6 million of requests. We've only included $1.7 million of them in the proposed budget. That is about 28%. It includes the addition of about 13 new positions. I will say that we had over 50 initiatives that are included from 20 different departments, but law and justice, and so that's our sheriff, that's our courts, it's county attorney's office, the legal defense departments, all of that together represents about 73% of the initiatives that we have included in the proposed budget. The sheriff specifically requested 24 new deputies. That would have cost about $3.6 million. As he currently still has vacant deputy positions, we have included 4. He's definitely made some progress from last year on filling vacant deputy positions, but there's no way that I could justify blowing up the budget to the tune of almost $4 million when there's still vacant positions. One other note, not really a budget initiative for this year, but with the board moving to bring the medical examiner function in-house, Staffing is expected to begin for that in Q4 of FY27, but just a heads up that in FY28, it will be an additional $1 million impact for those staffing over the full course of the year. So that's something on the horizon. It is built into the 5-year projection that I will show you later. In our county attorney's office, we have 2 reclassifications, relatively minor. The second one on the slide here to reclassify an office specialist to a supervisory position is part of a reorganization within their office. They have about 40 support staff that several supervisors oversee, and so this will really help them to do that more efficiently. I will note that the county attorney did request 4 additional attorney positions and related support staff. That would have been an additional $700,000, but as they have significant number of vacancies, we did not include that in the budget. The new county manager is asking for a deputy county manager position. This will, as stated on the slide, useful for efficient administration, succession planning, etc. I've already talked about the recruitment incentives for the attorneys across the different county departments and the floating holidays, so nothing more to say on that. The clerk of the board is asking for a reclassification for one of the administrative positions in her office, as well as a new agenda content management system, $23,000 for that. This is open meeting software, and as the board may recall, some ARPA funding was used to kind of convert the paper board agenda process to a digital process. That certainly got us through the insanity of the COVID times, but this is a real, this software would be a real step up. It has a lot more to offer than the current process that we're using through Laserfiche. And so look forward to seeing that put into place. Our elections department just has one reclassification request to the tune of $7,000. This is a 3-range increase for the position. In finance, requesting market adjustments for the 4 senior accountants in my office. It's a 2-step adjustment for each. The average years of experience in each of those positions, or across all 4 positions, is 24 years of experience, which really qualifies them for placement at top of scale. But understanding we have budget constraints, this is a well-deserved and much-needed increase. In our Superior Court, we have personnel requests totaling about $150,000. I'm going to highlight 2 of these. The Court Services Specialist that is split funded from Fee Fund 288. It's basically getting $25,000 of funding from that other court automation fund, but this position would support self-represented litigants, helping them to find necessary information to manage their cases. And then also the court transcriptionist. There's been ongoing issues. Court reporters are a dying breed, and so this would bring that function in-house. It's anticipated that about 75% of the cost of that position would be offset by savings on money that the court currently spends to hire outsourced third-party transcriptionists. And again, in the court automation fund, this is the funding source for that split fund court services specialist. And there's also a request for a 1-step market adjustment for the court administrator, but that also is no general fund impact. In our justice courts, some minor personnel adjustments, but also a new position, another court specialist. In FY26, the justice courts added 1 FTE. This court specialist is dedicated towards fee collection, and the fee revenues collected by those courts have increased dramatically over the last year. It's proven that the position was needed, was warranted, and is doing the job that it was intended to do, which is to drive up the collection rates on those fee revenues. Down in Havasu at the Justice Court, just 1 reclassification. Again, this is just simply administratively moving this position into a career progression series, so there's no anticipated cost in FY27. Our juvenile detention is asking to unfreeze a position for a detention officer that was frozen over 15 years ago. You can see on the slide just how much of an increase the juvenile detention has had in their residents over the last 5 years, and they do need additional staffing. In adult probation, there is a need to move the funding for a senior probation officer into the general fund, $125,000 impact. This was funded in the current year via a one-time transfer, but the Arizona Office of the Courts basically has requested that the probation department maintain a sufficient fund balance to kind of cover the cost of any additional salary and benefit increases over the coming years. State funding for that is kind of up in the air to be determined. Our HR department has a couple of different personnel initiatives, about $9,000. The last bullet point on this slide, updating the split funding ratio for the HR director. This will reduce the general fund cost. It brings the general fund piece of that split funding down from 0.5 FTE to 0.4 FTE. And for the other market adjustments in there, just note that those positions are split between the general fund and the employee benefit trust fund. Speaking of which, it's basically the other side of the equation here in the trust fund, market adjustments, reclassifications, and the change in that split funding ratio for HR generalist position. In risk management, there is a request for a new risk analyst. Currently, the department has 2 of these risk analysts, but one is almost solely dedicated to public works. And that remaining 1 position really is not sufficient to cover the needs for the entirety of the rest of the county. And so they're asking for 1 more risk analyst. And on to our sheriff's office. So as I mentioned before, we have 4 new deputy positions included in the proposed budget. It's about $600,000. As I mentioned, the sheriff had requested 24. We're willing to put 4 of them into the budget and see what he can do with filling those new positions as well as the current existing vacancies. His total personnel initiatives were about $700,000. There's a reclassification for a captain position to a commander position. This position would manage and direct currently manages the operational activities for the detention center, but will now also be overseeing the activities in the reentry program. And then there's some other reclassifications for animal control officers that total about $60,000. The sheriff also had a number of capital requests, much less than last year, about $100,000. The list is there on the screen. Really just mostly small expenses for equipment to help them do their job either more efficiently or more safely. In our treasurer's office, we have one market adjustment for the accounting manager. In the school superintendent's office, we have a market adjustment for the chief deputy school superintendent. I'll just say that both of these positions, the incumbents, based on their years of experience, qualify for higher placement according to the county's step placement guidelines, but due to budget constraints, we're putting in an adjustment, just not quite where they would actually qualify. But these are critical positions in both departments, and the adjustments are well-deserved and warranted. Moving on to our legal defense departments, public defender's office. We have one new attorney position. They did request 2 positions. We're including one. New office specialist, which would be support staff for the new attorney, and then a market adjustment. And this market adjustment, last year there was a kind of longer term special detail assignment for this attorney. They're focused on conflict evaluations, appeals evaluations, and expert witness evaluations. It was originally intended to kind of work through a backload, but as the workload has increased, is determined that really these duties are not going to go away, and so this is compensation for the additional work that this attorney is performing. Our legal advocate has requested to rename their department to the Juvenile Advocacy Office. This is a situation created by the State Supreme Court. They created a legal advocate program that fulfills functions that are entirely dissimilar to what our legal advocate's office performs, and so there's been some confusion, and so they are requesting to be renamed to a title that more accurately reflects the work that that department actually performs. They're also asking for an additional vehicle to help them meet their mandate for in-person meetings with their minor clients prior to any court hearings. Currently, they have 3 investigators that go out and do those client meetings. They all share one vehicle, and these clients can be anywhere around the state. They don't always reside within the county, and so there's significant distances traveled. Sometimes, if the vehicle is being taken by one investigator, the other 2 are left to use their personal vehicles, which may not be off-road capable, and oftentimes the residences that they're visiting are out in rural areas where they do need a 4x4 vehicle, and so this is what the department is requesting. Legal Defender's Office, this is again a budget neutral initiative. This is just administrative to move one of these positions into a career progression series. In our Recorder's Office, reclassification, moving 2 positions into a progression series, again budget neutral, and then a market adjustment for the records and imaging tech, and this really just to align the pay with the number of years experience the incumbent has. In our IT department, there is a request for some market adjustments, some equipment, one new position, an additional GIS technician. The county currently only has one GIS tech. This request comes with support from the sheriff, the recorder, and the elections departments. They all utilize these services. The use of GIS is really expanding, or has expanded a lot in the last couple of years, so this position is really needed in order to appropriately plan for succession planning and things like that. The one thing I want to highlight on here is this Axon Justice Premier for our legal defense departments. This was approved last year for the county attorney's office, but now the related legal defense departments also need access to the software. It really does enable them to more efficiently process cases. with access to digital evidence and things like that. That comes at a cost of about $55,000. All of the IT initiatives, this is an internal service department, and so these initiatives get billed out to the relevant departments through that internal service billing. And then in our public health department, we have a couple of different requests. The top request on this slide affects homebound meal delivery drivers for the Kingman and Golden Shore Senior Centers. And then there's also a request to basically fund a supervisory position in environmental health. It's mostly offset by defunding and freezing another position in the department. But this basically would focus on quality assurance to make sure that as they're doing inspections out in the community, that is done consistently and accurately. There's also capital requests for 2 more vehicles or replacement vehicles, not additional vehicles. These are in Lake Havasu, and again, similar to the reclassification on the prior slide, these are used for meal delivery to the homebound seniors in the community. And this is grant funded. In our library district, we actually have a request that results in a net savings. They are unfunding 1 IT support technician and then converting temps to part-time regular library aides. And then there's also a request for a replacement vehicle there. In developmental services, we have requests for an additional permit technician. This is driven by increases in the amount of septic permit activity over the last 7 years, an 80% increase. And so this additional position is needed to support that continued growth in permit activity, and it will be offset with additional permit revenues. At our landfill, we have a minor personnel request to reclass an office specialist, up 4 ranges from range 11 to range 15. And then on the capital side, about $6 million. This includes the items that are listed on the screen there. But these gas containment and collection systems are required as part of meeting our landfill closure, post-closure requirements. In our flood control department, so this is a big one, $26 million of capital requests, but very similar to prior years. You can see a number of projects listed there. Just a reminder to the board, the flood control is an independent taxing district, so they levy their own property tax, and that revenue funds all of these various projects. There are also significant grant components to each one of these projects. So for every local dollar that is spent, there's usually more than $1 of grant revenue or grant funding that's involved as well. In Public Works, we have a request to fund an Assistant Public Works Director position. $20,000 cost to the general fund. This is offset by eliminating a registered civil engineer position, but the Assistant Public Works Director would oversee facilities management, water systems and improvement, and the parks divisions. And as I said, most of this is offset by eliminating that other position. In the roads department, and so this is HERF funding, not general funding, market adjustments for a number of positions, and then creating a new engineering manager position over construction projects. In the roads division, capital expenses, just over $3 million, 12 vehicles in all. I'll just point out that the motor graders listed on here, the 4 motor graders, the Public Works participates in a trade-in program with the manufacturer, and so they get $150,000 trade-in credit on each of those vehicles. but those are absolutely necessary for maintaining the unpaved roadways within the county. Engineering has about $500,000 of capital requests. Most of it is tied to Bank Street design and right-of-way acquisition. This is for the northern stretch of Bank Street that is currently a dirt road. The soil stabilization and hard surfacing is planned for fiscal 29, but this funding allows that project to be designed and then for the department to acquire the necessary land to make sure that they can meet the requirements for that paved roadway. In traffic control, they're requesting replacement of 2 trucks, as well as purchasing a trailer-mounted message board. And again, this is still HERF funding, not general funding. Continuing with HERF funding, equipment maintenance division, capital requests total about $300,000. They're listed there on the slide. I'll just say that these fuel system upgrades that are listed, these have been ongoing over the course of several years as budget is available, but they really are needed in order to continue to bring all the different components of that system up to the same level. And there are some advantages to having that because they can tie in with their more up-to-date fuel software, and it allows them to purchase in bulk, and there's some savings generated there as well. In fleet services, and this is an internal service department, capital requests about $100,000. Again, installing a split tank in the Mojave Valley Yard, and then some other updates to the unleaded fuel system in Havasu, which would be completed not in 27 but in fiscal 28. But they do estimate close to $100,000 in annual savings once that project is completed. In the vehicle use division, we have 23 replacement vehicles this year. Most of those 14 are sheriff vehicles, and then you can see the rest of them listed there on the screen. Moving on to parks, down in Davis Camp, we have a request for some improvements to one of the RV sections down there. This funding is needed to kind of get the ball rolling to do a study that will then qualify the parks to hopefully bid and receive State Lake Improvement Fund grant funds. At one of our community parks, Neil Butler Community Park, is requesting a $20,000 local match. It will be paired with grant funds, but this would be used to construct large multi-sport courts. It would include lighting and fencing. The facility would be suitable for either 2 basketball courts, 2 tennis courts, or 6 pickleball courts. In Parks Administration, some personnel adjustments here, reclassifying an office assistant. It's not a currently funded position, but this would bring it up from a part-time position to a full-time position, and it would enable Parks to handle the accounting and administrative duties for the annual fair event, rather than what they currently do, which is utilize staffing from HERF, and via an IDT process. Moving on to our water systems, the I-40 and GVID, they are asking for a incentive program for water operators as they achieve additional certifications. They would qualify for a 1-step increase in pay. And just a note that these water divisions are fee funded. In the I-40, there's a little over $500,000 in capital requests, 2 replacement trucks, a new well shed, some continued improvements to the SCADA system. Just as a reminder, that system is used for the remote monitoring and maintenance of the water system. Really helps with the efficient operations of it. And then there's a request for $300,000 for a new standpipe facility that will enable secure storage for equipment and spare parts. In GVID, about $300,000 of capital requests, including a fire booster pump and a cross control system that will essentially allow the water district to shift the supply based on the demand that's currently ongoing. It does improve system redundancy as well in the case that one well goes out of commission or it needs to be taken down for repairs or something like that. That wraps up the initiatives. I'll just pause for a minute if anyone has any questions.
Any questions from the board? Anybody online have any questions? Carry on.
Thank you, Chairman. So moving on to revenues and expenses for FY27. I'm going to talk about property taxes. First, we are not recommending any change, no increase, no decrease to the levy rates as they exist currently. So our proposed levy rate for primary property tax for fiscal 27 is to remain the same at 1.8147. As Manager Strahl mentioned in his opening remarks, that is 80% of the max levy rate for the county for FY27. That max rate is 2.2548. And as you can see on the graphic, we're right about middle of the pack amongst the 15 counties as far as our primary levy rate. Just as a measuring metric, 1 penny of primary tax levy in fiscal 27 equates to $287,000 in tax revenue for the general fund. This next slide is the total countywide levy rates, and so this includes things like our primary levy rate, TV, library, flood, and fire district assistant tax. And so again, we're just about middle of the pack again. This is FY25 totals. This is the most recent data that's available from CSA, but it has not changed much year over year. Just quickly touch on excise tax. As I believe everyone is aware, Mojave County is the only county in Arizona that does not have a local excise tax. You can see all the other counties. The dark blue on the bar chart is county levied. The light blue is for the 2 counties that have a regional transportation authority that levies an additional tax. So this next slide is just some revenue numbers for next year. You can see FY26 budget numbers, second column from the left, what we're proposing for next year and the increase year over year. The top item is a non-recurring item, but this would be the second year in a row that we propose sweeping from the library district using the legislative flex authority. That's $1.25 million. But the bottom 4 lines on here, so current and delinquent property taxes, that makes up about 40% of next year's revenue. We have roughly, I believe it's $3.2 million increase there. $3.4 million increase. About $500,000 of that is a change from budgeting for a 97% collection rate to a 98% collection rate. Historically, the county had budgeted for a 95% collection rate. We boosted that to 97% in FY26, but looking at the last 5 years' data, the average collection has been 98.1%. So we're pulling that revenue lever for the last time that we're able to increase that from a budget standpoint. On the state shared sales tax, this is about 30% of our revenue for next year. We continue to see growth, as I mentioned before, through February. It was about a 3% year-over-year increase. And then The auto lieu tax and charges for services and transfers in make up the rest of that. So it's about an $8.7 million increase from the FY26 budget. But as you'll see, our expenses have increased by about $1 million more than that. But really covered all three of these bullet points. Just one minor note is that on delinquent taxes, we're budgeting for about a $250,000 increase, and this is based primarily on strong tax lien and tax deed sales over the last several years. And then here are our recommended tax rates. Again, these are identical to the rates the board approved for FY26. As I mentioned, the expenses outpaced the increase in revenue. We had $8.7 million increase in revenues, $9.7 million increase in expenses. I don't have all of the 9.7 listed on this slide. I wanted to highlight a couple of things because about 40% of this year-over-year increase in expense is tied to items that were approved for FY26 or that are coming from state mandates. And so, as I mentioned previously, we have the new Court Division 8 in FY26. It was not in effect for the entire year. It will be in effect for all 12 months of fiscal 27. That's about a $400,000 increase. That's for the 2 court commissioners and their support staff. And then on the Division 8 judge, it's about a $90,000 increase. We had some compensation adjustments for sheriff staff in FY26. It was a 2-year initiative, and so we will see almost another $500,000 increase moving into next year. As I mentioned before, medical examiner staffing will really only affect Q4 in FY27, but it's about a $250,000 impact. And then last year, as a means of balancing the FY26 budget, we took a number of measures where we looked at departments that receive annual support via a transfer out of the general fund, and we basically took a 1-year pause on some of those. We have to add them all back in this year because it was only a 1-year pause, and so that brings back almost $1.2 million in expenses. The last item in here highlighted in red, this is not something that we were expecting, but when the state came out with what each county was going to need to contribute to the long-term care component of the state's healthcare system, it's a $1.6 million increase for Mojave County. It's a 15% increase from where we're currently at today. So that was a big hit. Not happy to see that, but it is what it is. And then just lastly, for that medical examiner staffing, as I mentioned before, $250,000 increase for FY27, but once that department is fully staffed up and running for the entirety of FY28, it will add an additional $1 million in personnel and salary and benefits expense. This slide just as another metric for the board to consider, breakdown of services provided by the general fund. Services total about $173 million, and that basically includes our 10% contingency balance as well as the transfers out to other funds that receive general fund support. But 78% mandated services, 6% essential, 16% discretionary. To compare that to FY26, it was 79% mandated, 4% essential, and 17% discretionary. It's been remarkably, within 1 or 2% over the last couple of years. Pretty stable. So moving on to the overall general fund balance, recommendation is to maintain at the end of fiscal 27 about a $55 million general fund balance. That's comprised of 2 components, 10% contingency at roughly $14 million, and then 3.5 months of operating expenses to take us from that July 1st date all the way into the fall when the first half property tax payments come in. I will just say that we base these guidelines on the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, their fund balance guidelines recommend 2 to 10% minimum for contingency reserves, but that is based on the individual facts and circumstances for the entity when they're coming up with what percentage they are going to reserve for. We have two major risk factors, as I talked about before. Lack of diverse revenue streams. We're very reliant on property taxes and state shared revenues, 70% of the general fund revenues. And then, of course, we have the ongoing uncertainty in the state's budget process. You know, there was quite a surplus 2 years ago. They spent through that, allocated it all out, and so looking ahead to next year, it's much, much tighter. And so what that will mean for impact to the county, we do not know. But generally speaking, when the state has budget issues, it's not good for counties. So looking ahead, recommendations are going to be use only recurring revenues for recurring expenses, non-recurring revenues for non-recurring expenses. Look for some way to diversify those recurring revenue streams or boost those recurring revenue streams, and then to designate a portion of that undesignated general fund balance. The proposed budget is based on several assumptions listed there on the screen. Really, that last bullet point there is probably the most important because there are uncertainties in the world we live in, and just with what's going on geopolitically, if this Iran war or conflict continues to have impacts on fuel and overall global commerce, if that results in a prolonged downturn, that could have a significant impact on the budget. I'll just say there are a number of kind of known issues out there. There's always a number of ongoing tax litigation cases that the county is involved with. I've mentioned most of the other items on this slide already, but just revisit those cuts to 911 funding is almost $200,000. And then those unfunded legislative mandates will continue to negatively affect our budget. Again, just a summary of what we covered. General fund property tax rate, no change. Keep it where it is in the current year. Based on increasing property values and new construction, as well as moving that budgeted collection rate from 97 to 98%, gives us an additional $3.2 million in tax revenue. We're still far below the maximum levy rate. We have almost $13 million in additional levy capacity for that primary property tax levy. And just looking ahead to our final budget hearing later in June, we will need to have a TNT hearing, truth and taxation hearing, because the TNT rate for next year is about 20 cents below our proposed tax rate. So this 5-year outlook includes a number of things, but I'll direct the board's attention first to the third row of data, that net recurring revenue and expense. You can see the far left column is the current year, fiscal 26 budget. The final budget that was adopted had about a $1.8 million deficit. That was covered out of the general fund balance. As I mentioned before, we have increases in revenues looking to next year of about 8.7, increases in expense of 9.7. So we have about $1 million difference there. And so that takes us from a $1.8 million structural imbalance to a $2.9 million structural imbalance, which again would be covered out of that general fund balance. If you look further down on the slide, we have the non-recurring pieces. There's about $14 million for FY27. A big piece of that is what I mentioned before, is early repayment of that loan from the landfill fund. That's $8.7 million. It will save the county $860,000 in interest if the board approves repaying that all early in FY27. There's also when this projections were put together. If you look in the digital budget book, you might notice some differences in the numbers. When the budget book and the numbers were entered in the budgeting software, it was right around the time when we proposed some solar projects to the board that the board ultimately didn't move forward with, and so there was a $7.5 million funding out of that surplus fund balance. So it's still included in these projections in the digital budget book. And so that will get adjusted before we hit the tentative budget. But I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that. Also, in the non-recurring side of things, because we do have a surplus fund balance, and that's the numbers in yellow at the bottom of the slide, we are proposing that the board designate $4 million for future capital improvement projects and $3 million for IT infrastructure, essentially software replacement. There's a number of needs that are kind of on the horizon for the county. At some point, our treasurer's office is probably going to need a new software system if they can find another viable option. The current system certainly has some drawbacks to it that they're managing to work around, but it's not an ideal situation. It's also never an ideal situation when the treasurer's office and the assessor's office are on different software platforms because it just complicates the transfer of data. When they're calculating those annual tax bills, they get the property tax values from the assessor, and then the treasurer has to calculate what the actual tax bill will be. It would be simpler, more efficient, less prone to error if they were on the same system. And that's about it on the non-recurring side of things. Even with that early landfill repayment, even with the designating $4 million for future capital needs, $3 million for future IT infrastructure needs, you can see that bottom line was still about a $9 million surplus general fund balance. I say all of that just with the caution that if we do have a financial downturn, this really, funding that ongoing structural deficit, our expenses are going to continue to outpace our revenues. And if we do have a financial downturn, that $9 million of surplus, the almost $14 million in general fund contingency, those could evaporate pretty quickly. So it's just a word of caution to the board there.
Mr. Chair, this is Supervisor Letman. I have a question.
Supervisor Letman has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Luke, does the summary of the 5-year projection, does that include the added expenses for the medical examiner?
Chairman Lingfelter, Supervisor Letman, yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just add that any of the kind of multi-year expenses that we've talked about in any of the previous slides, we include all of those in the 5-year projection to make sure that it gives kind of the most accurate picture possible as we're projecting out. And as with any sort of projections, the further out on that 5-year timeline you get, the less accurate that is likely to be, because we're really just kind of guesstimating. There's so many factors that could impact that. So just continue to summarize, the proposed budget includes that $2.9 million structural imbalance. Again, expenses greater than revenues on the recurring side of things. It includes a number of carryover items from the current year's budget, basically multi-year impacts. and it includes that $8.7 million one-time expense to repay the landfill loan. We're considering that as 7.5 because it's offset with a $1.25 million sweep from the library fund. Just to quickly recap the budget initiatives, I'll just say that as you look through this list, sheriff deputies, probation, juvenile detention officers, the attorneys, the support staff, the bailiffs, the court support staff, all of that together is about 1.1 million of the $1.7 million total. The only things on there that aren't law and justice related would be the deputy county manager position, and then the kind of the vehicles and the reclassifications and market adjustments. The bulk of it is tied to our law and justice system. The board is well familiar with our overall timeline, but just to review it quickly, tentative budget would be the first regularly scheduled board meeting in June, and then final budget adoption, as well as the final budget hearing and adoption at the second board meeting in June, and then the adoption of the tax rates occurring at the first board meeting in August. And so any feedback that the board provides today, any direction, suggestions, we can incorporate into that tentative budget for June 1st. We can provide options like we did last year. You know, last year we had kind of some different scenarios that different board members wanted to see as part of a tentative budget. Happy to do the same this year. Just one reminder, though, that tentative budget, whatever does get approved on June 1st, that sets the expenditure ceiling for fiscal 27. And so if there are additional needs or priorities that board members have that will increase any sort of expenses, please communicate those to us so that we can present those as part of the tentative budget, because once a tentative budget is adopted, we don't have a mechanism to increase expenses past that point. And then very quickly, additional recommendations. So as we talked about, continue to fund the annual 3% performance-based comp increases, continue to fund PTO buyback, approve the revised floating holiday policy, approve those ongoing attorney recruitment incentives. I think last I checked, we had about a dozen attorney vacancies between the county attorney and the legal defense departments. Every single one of those positions is desperately needed. There's case backloads. They need to be filled. And so the hope is that those recruitment incentives will go a long way to help fill some of those vacancies. Fully funding a 10% contingency reserve for the general fund, eliminating that landfill debt, and then those two designations, $4 million to capital improvement, $3 million for technology infrastructure. The overall budget as presented for all funds, $624 million. That includes $141 million in operating expense for the general fund, $35 million in the capital projects fund, and that $35 million number is the fiscal year end 2026 capital fund balance. And then, as I mentioned before, general fund property tax and state and federal shared revenue make up about 80% of general fund revenues for next year. And so all of our recommendations are really intended to provide whatever long-term financial stability and sustainability that we can, but without any sort of changes to the revenue structure for the county. It remains difficult to do that. And that wraps it up for me.
Thank you, Director Morney. Allow me to amend what I said previously about public comments. This meeting was not noticed for general public comments. Obviously, everybody that's in the audience today, our elected officials, our courts, our department heads will get the opportunity to speak. So with that, I'll open up to the board to see if they have any questions for finance at this time. Supervisor Gould?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Mornian, you're making the assumption that the legislature is going to give you the sweep authority. Have they, to sweep library money, have over the recent past, have there been any years that they didn't allow sweeps?
Chairman Lingenfelter, Supervisor Gould, I would have to research that. I can tell you that since I've been CFO, that sweep authority has been granted every year. It was included in the executive recommendation when the budget was released in January. We've had no indication that they're not going to include it, but you are correct. That is one assumption that we are banking on.
And currently we're in the part of the legislative session where the governor threatens to veto bills that come from the legislature because they can't make a budget.
Absolutely. And so, that would take us from a roughly a $3 million deficit to a $4.25 million deficit if it was not approved.
Did we monkeyed around with the property tax rates between 4 of the 5 rates that we control? Did we increase the library rate or did we decrease the library rate last year?
Supervisor Gould, we decreased the library and the TV district tax rates last year. It was a 4-cent decrease in the library district and a 2-cent decrease in the TV district. And so 6 cents total decrease and then 6 cents increase in the primary property levy rate.
Sure. You spoke of debt-free. The interest that we pay, that we were speaking of on that issue, is interest to make up the loss of interest revenue to the landfill closure fund.
That's correct, Supervisor Gould.
So it's essentially we're paying interest to ourselves, or we're replacing the lost interest from the investment of the landfill.
Yes, and so when that loan was taken from the landfill, there was a loan agreement between the general fund and the landfill fund that the board approved, and that included a 2.5% interest rate.
Sure. If you go to your spreadsheet, I think it's the first one that comes up. Wasn't part of the presentation, but there's a column under revenue for intergovernmental, and that column seems to always have $125 million difference between the adopted number and the projected number, like say 2026 adopted and 2026 projected. So it looks like historically we don't. What is that?
Sorry, are you referring to the digital budget book PDF?
Yeah.
Which page?
One of those pages.
We've only got 1,148 pages to choose from, so.
And my computer screen is off currently. And my incredibly long password. Where's the page number on this?
IT security is important.
I don't see a page number on it, to tell you the truth. All funds summary.
Okay.
So if you go beginning fund balances, third item down, the column is intergovernmental. The adopted, fiscal year 2026 adopted is 236 million. Projected is 116 million. And that's, if you roll back even further, it seems like there's always about 125 million difference between what's budgeted and what's spent. And I'm just curious, what is that column of intergovernmental?
So, Supervisor Gould, good question. I believe, so what we budget for in the other funds includes, a lot of them have significant fund balances, and so that is generally budgeted as a contingency that rolls over from year to year to year. And so when you look at all of those other funds that comprise, much more than the general fund portion of the county's budget, that's what's making up.
So it's the difference between what we could spend and what we do spend in those funds?
I believe so. I think a lot of that. So we're talking about revenue. I'm sorry, we're talking about revenue here. So this I believe that this is potential grant revenues. And so we budget for them under the assumption that if they are received, then those departments are able to spend them.
Okay. So it may be money that never materializes.
And that's why you see such a big difference between
that makes
the
sense.
budgeted and then the actual numbers.
Yeah, I was going to say we're doing an outstanding job of not spending the money then. And thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Other board members, questions for financial services? Supervisor Martin?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Supervisor Letman, go ahead. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I want to thank Supervisor Gould for the question about the landfill loan. I have a follow-up to that, and that's regarding the $7 million one-time payment. I'm still not sure what the consequence of not making that $7 million payment is. What if we said, because we're interested in cash conservation, obviously, what if we said we're only going to pay $3 million?
Chairman Lingenfelter, Supervisor Letman, it's a good question. One of the reasons that we're suggesting to repay the entire balance, well, number of reasons. First and foremost, debt reduction is generally a good thing, but there's about $860,000 of interest expense that the general fund will save by repaying that loan now rather than over the next 8 years that remain on the loan repayment schedule. The other issue is that and Scott will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's the Mojave Valley landfill received notification that they need to drill a couple more gas monitoring wells, and I believe that comes with a price tag of right around $3 million. And so rather than deplete the existing balance in that landfill fund, there's a need to kind of augment it so that they have cash on hand to meet that mandate to dig those additional monitoring wells rather than really depleting their overall fund balance.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with the strategy of the $7 million complete payment on that. When you look at the cost of capital and the need to convert cash, I would probably weigh in on a smaller payment, but that's just my opinion. Thank you.
I will also just add that those annual payments, I believe, in the current repayment schedule are anywhere from $1 million to $1.3 million each year, looking forward. And so, while I can understand the desire to maintain a significant cash reserve in the general fund, that will decrease any sort of flexibility that the county has in the event that we do face some issues in future years, because that is basically a cost that's going to, that expense will need to be met and dealt with. And so repaying it now basically removes an item that would be competing for whatever resources are needed at the time.
Understood. Thank you.
Director Morty, and if you want to refresh everybody's memory, the reason that we took that loan off the landfill is it was to make a contribution towards the public safety personnel retirement system. Can you just give everybody just a brief refresher on that? Just maybe a minute.
Certainly, Chairman Lingenfelter. So you're absolutely correct. The county, I believe the first lump sum payment, and so the pension plans that the county participates in, basically the state pension funds. This is the public safety retirement system fund. The county has what they call an unfunded accrued actuarial liability, and so basically that is when the actuaries look forward over the life of that pension plan. They look at the current employees and who's going to retire and how long they're going to draw on that plan and what that overall cost will be. And then they compare that to the current balance that's in there. And they say, well, you have, if you need 300 million and you only have 200 million, then you're 66% funded. And so at the time, the county I want to say PSPRS, we were funded down in like the high 50s or low 60% range, and a lot of work went into kind of restructuring those pension plans at the state level to make sure that they remain viable long term. There were a number of different options that counties had. Some counties opted to go out to bond to generate the cash to make those lump sum payments in there to get their funding percentage up to where they deemed necessary. Mojave County, because we had some cash on hand, and the general approach that Mojave County has taken over the years is to pay as we go rather than to incur debt. It would also be difficult to incur debt without a revenue source to bond against. And so there was an initial payment of $3.5 million that was made, a lump sum payment. And then the decision was made to also take a $10 million loan from the landfill fund and make an additional $10 million lump sum contribution into that pension plan to get that funding percentage, or the unfunded percentage, down quite a bit.
Yeah, the intent was to, rather than borrow bonds, to borrow against ourselves. That makes better financial sense, to shore up the PSPRS for Mojave County. We made commitments to our public safety personnel when it comes to their retirement, so we wanted to make sure that we made that system whole enough. And I agree with the whole payment. I think that as this board is a steward of the taxpayer dollars, these dollars are not ours. We're the stewards of these funds. It makes good sense just to pay it off. If there's going to be $800,000 of interest payments, the taxpayers don't receive any value from us paying on interest payments. You can avoid interest in all circumstances.
I will add one more thing, that when we initially looked at the difference that making that $10 million lump sum contribution would make on a cash flow perspective, because where the county's funding levels are in that pension plan directly affects what percentage the county is required to contribute each year going forward. And to a lesser extent, I believe, what the employees that participate in that plan also have to contribute out of their paychecks. And over, I believe, the modeling that I did took it out to, I want to say it was fiscal 35 or 36. It was going to generate more than a one-to-one return. It was over $10 million in cash flow savings. And that's partly from the reduced county contribution over the years. And the other component of that is that a higher fund balance in that pension plan generates more in investment earnings over that same time frame. So those were the other pieces to that equation.
I think Mojave County handled that situation correctly, in my opinion.
But Mr. Chair, I have a follow-up question.
I'm asking more questions. I'll go to you, Supervisor Gould. I understand it. There's so many requests, and we just don't have enough money, not enough resources to fund them all. I have one question regarding all of the adopted market adjustments. Were all of those market adjustments uniformly evaluated by the county manager and finance on their value to the overall organization compared to the priorities and other requests that we have?
Chairman Lingenfelter, great question. So the process that we went through for any budget initiatives that were personnel related, and this direction was given to the departments, when we started in October with the internal service departments, and then when we had the budget kickoff in December for the rest of the departments, the direction was work with HR. If you're requesting a market adjustment, HR needs to look at the market data and say, does this actually qualify for the adjustment that you're requesting? I can't point to any specifics, but I will say that, generally speaking, whatever the step requested was, and I think the biggest jump that we had was a 3-step market adjustment. HR looked at the data, compared it with other positions in the marketplace, and there's supporting memos for each one of those initiatives that say, yes, this adjustment is warranted and needed.
Appreciate it. I just want to caveat that with everybody that works for the county, all the divisions, all the departments, programs, they're all doing great work, right? and they may think that their work is worth a lot more than what they're being paid, and I don't disagree with that. But any organization out there, whether you're in the public sector or the private sector, you have to make determinations on what you can afford. So we're not saying that you're not worth more. It's just we don't have the money or the resources to give it out, right? Otherwise, that $9 million you were talking about in contingency, we'd blow past that and then some. So, Supervisor Gould, and then I'll get to you, Supervisor Borelli. I think I heard you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to shed a little light on the public safety pension issue. A lot of this comes from poor management of the public safety pension back around 2000 in the dot-com bubble era. They were making a lot of money. They loaded up additional benefits into that pension. And also that pension is different than the pension that most of the state employees are in. Any increase in those costs get pushed onto the employer. They're not picked up by the employee, as where the ASRS, that's a split between the employer and the employee. So it magnifies that effect on the employer. But that's really what this is about poor management of that pension fund. They've changed the management of that pension fund since then. That's been over 25 years. But that's really what created this issue. And that was why cities and counties and the state all had to come up with extra money to fix this problem that was created by poor management of the pension fund. I just want to reiterate that it was not something that the county created. It was something that the pension board actually created this problem. And they need to watch this, and we put some fixes in to stop these things from happening. So when they're making a bunch of money in the stock market, they don't come in and run those bennies up, and then we have to pay for those after the market tanks. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Supervisor Borelli, I think I heard you. Did you have a question?
I think that was me.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Letman.
Supervisor Letman. My apologies.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow back up on the landfill loan. Luke, what is the interest rate that is being charged on that loan?
Supervisor Letman, it's 2.5%, and that interest rate was, at the time that the general fund entered into that agreement with the landfill fund, it was based on the interest earnings rate that the treasurer's office was currently experiencing with their investments. That was back when interest rates were far lower than they are today. It was a pretty good deal, especially when you look at it, the last couple of years. It was a very good deal because interest rates spiked and we're paying far less than market rate, even for a municipal type of bond rate.
My point exactly. I agree with that. So what is the interest we earn on excess cash that we put into a state supervised investment fund? What is that rate that this money would be earning?
Supervisor Letman, I believe currently overall the treasurer's investments are earning, I want to say it's between 4 and 5%. I would have to check on that and get back to you though.
Okay, so I'm assuming the $7 million would be subject to that investment earning interest income on that. Is that correct?
That is correct, Supervisor Letman. It's part of the pooled investments of the county treasurer's office.
So why would I want to take $7 million from a fund that earns 4% and pay off a 2.5% loan?
As I mentioned before, Supervisor Letman, there is a need for additional cash in that landfill fund for those gas monitoring wells. Okay,
then repay back the amount they need for the capital project they need to do. I just don't understand why you would take money from a fund that earns more to pay off interest on a loan that is less. And that's my point. And we'll talk about it in public session, okay, when we get to this at a regular meeting.
I have a question.
Any other questions? Okay.
Yes.
Hearing none, we're going to go to
Chairman.
opportunity to speak. If the elected officials,
Chair.
we're on our agenda first. If you're an elected official, you'd like to speak, if you'd like to come up to the front,
Mr. Chair.
2 rows. Oh, excuse me. Did you have another question?
Yes, Chair, this is Supervisor Borelli.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my question was go back to landfill. Where did we borrow that money from? Do we borrow that from the fund itself, or Can you kind of give me some more background on that?
Chairman Lingenfelter, Supervisor Borelli. Yes, it was an internal loan, so it was basically from the landfill fund to the general fund. The general fund borrowed from that other fund's balance, and then the general fund took that money and contributed as a lump sum contribution into the PSPRS pension plan.
So my question is, Mr. Chair and Luke, why don't we just pay interest only back to that fund? I mean, yeah, it's not interest only, principal only.
Supervisor Borelli, the agreement that is in place, and I would have to check into the legality of whether, what it would take to modify the agreement. It is an internal agreement, but that's the agreement that is in place, and that's the numbers that I'm basing all the calculations and recommendations off of.
I understand this is because this is prior to you, Mr. Chair. Is there a way to restructure this debt to where we're just making principal only and saving the money on interest?
Supervisor
Restructure.
Borelli, I can consult with our county attorney's office and look into that. But that's not it's not a good deal for the landfill fund, certainly. We'd have to check on the legality of it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we're going to move to our elected officials. I could just open it up to all of our elected officials. Do any of our elected officials in the audience today, would you like to have an opportunity to speak? Sheriff Schuster.
Fantastic job, CFO. Okay, if I could get my slide presentation up. Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, county manager, Madam Clerk. I'm going to attempt to be very brief, but I do have some information that I would like to share, especially because we have a new county manager and a little backstory.
Sheriff, is it on the screen or do you just have printouts?
Just on the screen.
Okay, can we get the, thank you.
Okay. So the big issue is the ask for 24 more deputies. In reality, yes, I'm presenting that, but it's the citizens asking. You all know this. I have requested repeatedly for staffing increases since taking office, but I want to give a brief history. I've been with the sheriff's office now for 36 years. I was elected sheriff initially in 2016, and I took office in January of 2017. At the time I took office, the agency is what I would call a listing ship. We were not doing well. We were not able to provide the service capabilities that we should. So in fact, when I took office, and this is something I've told you all before, but for the benefit of the county manager, in 1990, we had more deputy sheriffs on the street than when I took office in 2017. So we came into some critical issues. In 2017, we conducted a needs assessment. We came in and we said, look, we know we have problems, but what are we going to do to correct this? So we came up with a 10-year strategic plan, and this plan was released in 2018, so it took us about a year to compile. Out of that time frame, we were able to correct the things we could correct. We had a lot of internal issues that we worked on to enhance morale, provide our staff with a solid and unwavering direction moving forward. And I apologize, I'm dealing with a little nasally cold, so I'm working through it. But if you hear me sniffling, I can only apologize. Where was I? One thing that was important to me was a valid mission statement where we treat everybody with respect and courtesy. Okay, that is vital. Our citizens have been very good to law enforcement here in Mojave County. We have tremendous support from our citizens, and they're entitled to be treated fairly. And another top priority was to to take a very hard line stance on crime. The goal was to reduce crime even though the county continued to grow. Staffing levels are critical. They dictate the amount of time that our deputies have to investigate on a patrol level. And an example of that would be if I have 2 deputies working a shift and there's 30 calls for service during that shift, that's 15 calls per deputy. That does not leave any time for the deputy to do on-scene investigation. They're running call to call to call. Same scenario, make it 6 deputies per shift. Now you're breaking it down to 5 calls per deputy, and you find the time to do that investigation. So that's why we've been pushing for more staff. We'll get to the 24 number here in just a second. One thing I want to show you is what can be done. Again, my emphasis is crime reduction. And we recognized very early on at the sheriff's office, we had a huge problem with burglaries in the county. I'm going to show you this next slide. So in 2017, when I took office, you can see we had 820 burglaries in Mojave County. It's an unacceptable number, and this is just one crime out of course, numerous crimes that occur all the time. So we began a very directed approach. We began doing solid investigations and then reassigning those investigations for follow-up, and we started recognizing some arrests out of that. Well, here's the thing. When you make an arrest, you can either stop there or you could press forward. We decided to press forward. We want search warrants. And again, it's time-based. Do I have time to do this? So we wrote search warrants for residences, for cars, sheds, and we began closing out prior burglaries. So now when you think about that number, 820 burglaries, that's not 820 burglars. That's 50 or 60 burglars doing it over and over and over again. So take 5 out of that equation. You're going to see your numbers drop. This is a key indicator of what can be done. This is what your Mojave County Sheriff's Office has done, and kudos to the deputies that made this happen. So 2017, 820 burglaries. You see the steady decline year after year, the little anomaly in 2021, and then 2025 as of last year, we're under 300. So we've dropped over 64%, yet the population continues to rise. So that's something of note. I just wanted to show you that slide. Again, to me, it's important to demonstrate what our capabilities are. Imagine if we could invest this much time in every investigation we do. But we're not going to get there until we have the staffing to do so. Okay, so I would like to move forward. Our strategic plan identified, this is not in order. Our strategic plan identified 5 areas of concern. Multiple smaller issues that we addressed in-house, things that, we tried to boost morale. We changed the culture and the environment. That was much needed. The most important thing to me was to change the mission statement, the mindset. When we go out and deal with the public, it should be a positive interaction. 95% of the people we deal with are just like you and I. They're average citizens. When it comes to that 5%, the lawbreakers, we're going to hit them hard. We're going to continue to hit them hard because we don't want that element in our communities. But we have to understand everyone is deserving of respect and courtesy. So that was the first thing to break, believe it or not, because when I came in 17, we were severely understaffed, severely underpaid, morale was in the toilet, workload was excessive, and you think the deputies got a little grumpy? Of course they did. Okay, so we had to work on changing that culture, and a good example I can use to explain it better, my first month in office in 2017, I took close to 60 complaints against our deputies. I haven't had a complaint in probably 6 years now, maybe 1 or 2 a year, but I got a lot of attaboys. That shows the measure of what we're doing and that it's working. So getting to the master plan, we found 5 areas that needed assistance from you, the board. Number 1, facilities. With the support of this board, we secured $9 million from the state, and I want to thank our state representatives for their assistance. And this was used to replace 3 outdated, aging substations. We now have exceptional substations. We're very, very fortunate, and this came at no cost to our taxpayers. Why do I say that? Because it's vital for you, the board, to hear, but more importantly for the public to hear. The sheriff's office does everything within its power to generate its own funding. We recognize a need, we search out grants, we look for state opportunities, and at the end of the day, since taking office, we brought in over $30 million. So we're doing our part. And I think this board knows, especially those with tenure, that when I come before the board, I try and bring at least a partial solution to the problem. You know, hey, I'll reduce this over here to make this work. I always try and participate in that manner. Please excuse me. Okay, so facilities were a problem, corrected. Let's take a look at what we did. So on the top of that slide, you can see the old Lake Havasu City substation. It was a gem. I don't miss it at all. And now we're in our new substation down there on Showplace Drive on the outskirts of the city, 12,000 square foot building. This was very cost effective because to build new was out of our range. We had $9 million for 3 buildings. So to build new, we got creative and we sought out existing buildings. This one was under construction. We bought the shell and framed it out to our specifications. It's fantastic. And I work out of it quite a bit. This is the Mojave Valley substation we replaced. Slide on top is the old substation. That was deplorable. Towards the end, we had infestation problems like you wouldn't believe. And so now we have this fantastic new 2-story, 12,000 square foot building, ideally meets our needs now and well into the future. So we're very pleased to get those 2. And recently, we picked up yet a third up on the Colorado Strip. On the left, you'll see the little shell of a building. That's actually a single-wide mobile home that was put up there, I believe, in the mid-'80s. With the understanding it was temporary, it was going to be replaced, and it sat there till today. So we were able to replace that, and the deputies, of course, are extremely pleased. When we looked at the plan, we also recognized we were doing well with equipment, but we needed better equipment. So we took care of that. Okay, that is no longer an issue. Facilities crossed off the list. Equipment, we're doing just fine. I'm not asking for any equipment other than the routine requests I get each year for ongoing operations. Then we had a big issue with communications. We have been working off an antiquated radio system for probably 4 or 5 decades. It's an old VHS system, very spotty in many areas throughout the county. The deputies simply couldn't speak on the radio, couldn't transmit. And so we were fortunate this year, and a big thank you to Supervisor Gould for getting us some additional funding to buy portable radios. We have now piggybacked onto Havasu's digital system. Big shout out to Chief Sterling and of course the city leaders. Very supportive. They said, look, we recognize you have a need. These radios now are accessible anywhere in Mojave County, anywhere in the state, anywhere in the country. So if I took that portable radio to New York, I could transmit and talk to our dispatch center here. It's fantastic. It's a huge improvement, and we're going to look to continue by piecemealing, replacing vehicle radios as we move forward. But all deputies have brand new portables, and they're working great. We talked about salaries. We recognized a major problem with salaries, and I'm going to just go through it very lightly because we fixed it. It's very important that you understand we fixed that. And we fixed it because of your support and understanding. For many years, we were well below competitive salary levels. Many years. As a result, we experienced a very high rate of turnover and an ongoing inability to attract qualified applicants. This actually reached a breaking point a couple times during my tenure. You may recall that back in fiscal year 22-23, we had 48 vacancies in our detention center, DO vacancies. We only staff about 100 DOs, so that was almost 50% vacancy rate. It was unsustainable. We went through a tremendous amount of overtime using salary savings, and we just couldn't keep going down that line. So the following fiscal year, I came to you and I submitted a fix. I said, this is what we need to do to increase compensation to, and you'll hear me say this next word a lot, a competitive level. We have to be competitive locally. It's that simple. So we did that. You did that. You approved the funding. We raised the salary. And today I have 0 vacancies in the jail. 0. I have people waiting to get into the jail. So it clearly worked. Same thing held true in patrol. When I took office, we had 83 deputy sheriff positions with 18 vacancies. Since that time, we've been graciously afforded the ability to add more deputies, so we're up to 100, and currently we have 4 vacancies. But there's a caveat. CFO Mornian is 100% correct. We do show the vacancies, but a little different. It's a little different than your 9 to 5 vacancy in the sense that I have a waiting list. I could fill them right now, but I don't have an academy to send them to. So on paper, I show 4 vacancies, but I got 10 people waiting for the job. The point being is we finally reached a position where staffing is no longer an issue. I wouldn't come before the board and ask for any additional positions if I had 10, 12 vacancies that I knew I couldn't fill. The vacancies we currently have, we already have people in line. We're not going to fill them until we get closer to an academy date or we receive a lateral application that we're interested in. So we're doing tremendously well. The area in our strategic plan as it talks about staffing is what is an acceptable staffing level. Yeah, I think you've all read it. If you haven't, I'd be happy to get you a copy of it. But at the end of the day, we are doing really well from where we were, but we're still a ways away from where we need to be. The county population continues to grow. Every time a new business goes in or a family moves here, the potential for calls for service go up. A great example is the Walmart in Mojave Valley. I think it's 4 years old now. Well, we didn't add any staff when that came in, but it generated 30 calls a month for the sheriff's office. Think of the magnitude when you bring in a 2,000 home community, the service needs on that. We have to maintain a certain level to stay competitive with the growth. And we're behind. I'm not going to lie, we're behind. The average level is based on a 1 officer per 1,000 citizen, per 1,000 populated citizen. Well, we're sitting well below 1 per 1,000. Well, the state norm, and when I say norm, this is a calculation that the DOJ does showing I think it's 1.8. I didn't write it down, but I'm pretty sure about that. But I know the national average is over 2 per 1,000. So in reality, I could say I need double the staff today, but I recognize that's not going to happen. I simply need to express to you where we're at and where we're trying to get to. So here you can see on a quick slide, in 2017, we had 83 funded positions, 18 vacancies. That was 65 filled positions, and that includes our detectives, that includes search and rescue. That wasn't just people out there on patrol, deputies on patrol. Doing much better. We have 100 funded positions. We have 3 that should be 4. We lost 1 the other day. 4 vacancies, but again, we're ready to fill them when the right person presents. So you can see in funded positions, we've increased by 20%. We're heading in the right direction. Filled positions, we've increased 49%. Vacancy reduced by 83%. That's critical. Why? Why did it go down so much so quickly? Because we elevated salary. We made ourselves competitive with local agencies. Up until probably 3 years ago, we were considered a training ground for other agencies. People came here to get the certification. We taught them how to be a law enforcement officer, and then they went locally to another agency to make more money. We're no longer the training ground. We've taken over 20 laterals from local agencies coming to us now. That's impressive, and it's because they recognize, in my humble opinion, the sheriff's office is the place you want to work. We treat our staff good, we treat the public good, and we're always going to fight for both. So that's what I do. I come up here and I try and express to this board how important these things are. So now I'm going to move forward to the 24 deputy request. I don't expect this board to give me 24 deputies. That was not the intent. The intent is to show you what we need in order to bring us back in line with our 10-year plan. Hold on a second. So if you look at our 10-year plan, if we stayed consistent from day one, we would be 24 deputies higher than we are today. This was our timeline presented to the board, the previous boards, on what we were trying to accomplish. We got some of it done. Very appreciative for where we did get to, but we're still well behind where we where we need to be. And we're a smaller county, I get that. We are never going to reach the level we should be at. I don't believe it. I don't see it happening in my time anyway. But, you know, if we get up to, I think it's 152 deputies over the next decade, we're going to be okay as long as we can maintain from that point with population. The biggest issue comes down to kicking the can down the road. If we'd added 1 or 2 every year since I've worked here, I wouldn't be up discussing this. But we wait for 25 years and then say, oh, by the way, there's a problem. It's very hard to fix a problem of that magnitude overnight, thus the 10-year plan. But we're getting close to that 10-year plan, so I'm simply pointing out that if we add any staffing, it's a benefit. I still want 24. What I'm willing to offer, because I didn't know the county lent the county money with interest. If I have salary savings this year, I'm happy to lend it to the general fund at a modest interest rate. And I think we can use that savings to get more officers. But so I'm not going to take much more time. I do want to say 2 things. Number one, I appreciate what you do. I really do. I appreciate what the board does. Welcome aboard, County Manager. I know it's difficult, but this is real world stuff. This is life and death. This is officers out there working by themselves. If you can collectively come up with a way to get me more than 4 deputies, because I know we're able to cover 4, I'm going to lean on you for that. Okay, because you're not doing it for me. You're doing it for your constituents. You've all heard we don't see enough deputies. Why is the response time so long? So I'm here bequesting on their behalf that you collectively try and come up with a mechanism to fund 24 / anywhere between 4 and 24. I'd be appreciative. Lastly, I'm going to say a big thank you to our CFO, Luke Mornian. He's been a blessing to work with. I aggravate him on a daily basis. He puts up with me. He actually wants to be a deputy. We're working on his uniforms. I don't know if he's going to pass the background yet or not, but we're going to keep pushing. And then all the staff in finance, but especially Judy and Sonia, they're amazing. I mean, I really put these people through the ringer, and last minute, hey, I need to do this or that, and they've just been exceptional. So no, you have wonderful staff there, and thank you for your time, and I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Sheriff. Any questions for the Sheriff? Thank you to you and your staff for putting your life on the line out there to keep everybody else safe. And you didn't mention all the tourists that we get. You got to wrangle all those Californians that come over to recreate too. So
very much so. Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any of our other electeds, assessor, treasurer, recorder, Henry.
Good morning, Supervisors. I just wanted to take a brief moment to share appreciation to you guys for having this meeting, giving us the opportunity to express any concerns that we have with the budget. Of course, appreciation to budgets overall and my management team that assisted me in putting this together. And then, of course, for the staff members that do the day in and day out for us. I do have the 2 so far approved initiatives of a market increase and then a reclassification for a position to continue in the progression series. I would like to see future full-time positions to be added in future budgets for the Recorder's Office and Voter Registration Division. If you have any questions, happy to answer them, but just keeping it brief today.
Thank you. Any questions for Recorder Henry? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The job you do. Anybody else? Treasurer Mello, would you like to speak? No? Okay. Any of our constables here, would they like to speak? No? I guess that means we'll go to the courts. It's Superior Court, Clerk of the Court, Probation, Justice Courts, Judge Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, County Manager Strahl, Luke, and your staff, which I will say have been absolutely professional and on the ball throughout this process and keeping us all on our toes. Thank you very much for engaging with us in this process. Thank you to the Board of Supervisors who is making this workshop available to us so that we can all see where the board's revenue and expense issues are at, where the future is going for each and every department and the county as a whole. I will echo more from a judicial standpoint than a law enforcement standpoint what Sheriff Schuster stated. When I was on the board back in the 2000 teens, my recollection is that we were far more reactive than proactive to county growth and problems. Over the last few years, especially the last couple years, I think the board has become more proactive, and we're not necessarily reacting to every problem. We're identifying potential problems in the future and identifying potential solutions, even if we can't implement them today because of budgetary reasons. At least we know they're on the horizon. The workload for the courts at the superior court level, whether you include the clerks and the probation departments or the judicial officers, greatly exceeds the number of judges that we have available to handle that workload. We have not sought the additional 3 positions that it would take us to handle that workload for a variety of reasons. One is budgetary. You folks have been very good about helping us correct that imbalance over time, and we do greatly appreciate that. It's also logistical. We don't necessarily have the courtrooms to put them into, even if you gave them to us, so that is also in process of being corrected. But over time, as our population increases and our caseloads continue to increase, my shortage of 3 today could be a shortage of 5 2 years from now. And we have time standards and constitutional restrictions which require us to process cases at a certain pace. I only say those words in order to provide a heads up as to future budget cycles, because again, the county has been very good to us when it comes to doing what it can within the budget constraints that we have. And we are making forward progress, and we are keeping our head above water, even if we're only treading water and not necessarily swimming. So I do greatly appreciate that, but I wanted to give you folks a heads up as to future potentialities, just like Sheriff Schuster did when it comes to his law enforcement shortages. It's a good problem to have, I guess, in a way, because we're growing as a county, which means that our economic situation should be improving, and I think the budget indicated that when it shows the property taxes increases as a gross matter of collections anyway, and our state shared revenues going up for the same reason, and the auto issues for the same reason. It's a bad problem to have, because as those increases occur, demand and services increase, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's courts, whether it's the public defenders or prosecutors. So I stand ready to answer any questions you might have regarding the court system, but I do want to extend my appreciation to finance, the county manager, and this board for all that you have done for us.
Judge Moss, thank you for your comments. Any comments or questions for Judge Moss? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the court? Clerk of the court, probation, justice courts? Would you like to have a few remarks at the podium? Morning. Thank you.
Want is a strong word, but I should probably say something. For our budget this year, we're just maintaining status quo, but that is not to say that next year we won't have additional asks. We are working with the Supreme Court on obtaining a new jury software, which is probably going to come at an increased price. We've been using our current jury software since the early 2000s, so it's a little outdated. So we're looking to do that, but we are funding that through B funds, the implementation of that, so that's not coming out of the county budget. And also, I would just like to extend my thanks to Luke and his team, and you all for considering our budgets this year.
Your comments, Administrator Spurlock. Anybody have any questions for Administrator Spurlock? Thank you again. Anybody else from the courts? I see County Attorney Smith way in the back. Did you want to have an opportunity to speak today, sir, or are you good? Well, up to you. We're here. We're all here. Good morning.
Chairman Lingenfelter, members of the board, Madam Clerk, our new Mr. County Manager, thank you for inviting me up to speak. I wasn't actually planning on speaking today, but I feel like I was challenged and I need to come out. The first thing I want to do is also, as many other people have done, is thank our finance department, who is absolutely wonderful to work with. They've been not only accommodating, but also have been very forward in their thinking. And anytime that we've come up with something, they always consider it. They don't always say yes, but they always consider it, and they have well-reasoned arguments when they deny a request. And obviously it comes down to the budget, it comes down to revenues and expenses. One thing I want to thank the board for more than anything is the recruitment and retention bonuses of $10,000 for existing attorneys. The number of our attorneys that have been with us for a number of years immediately signed up and accepted those bonuses. Not everybody has, and that's kind of a hidden tool that we've seen, because we kind of have an idea of some people that maybe are looking for other jobs at this time, and at least it gives us a heads up on having an opportunity at least to discuss things with them, to talk to them and find out what they might need in order to continue employment with our agency. Right now, we are facing an incredible amount of openings in our office. We've lost a number of attorneys. We've lost a number of attorneys to judicial positions. We have another attorney that is going to win the election, I believe, down in Lake Havasu City because she's running unopposed. So we have lost now 3 attorneys in the last 6 months to the bench. We have a number of openings, so at this time we're not asking for any new positions. We did in the budget, but we realize we need to fill these positions. I think that along with some of the things that the sheriff mentioned, we definitely are competitive in our salary, but we're still a little bit lacking in that area. So that is something I think that we'd ask the board to consider and think about going forward. When you're down as many people as we are, services are going to suffer. There's just no way around it. Being down 10 attorneys right now, it is very difficult to get things taken care of. It's difficult in charging all the cases that are coming in. We are behind in that endeavor right now. We're trying to get caught up on that. And it's just very difficult to cover all the courts and to maintain the same level of service. And those are costs that are difficult to quantify. You look at it, I'm sure, as the board, and you're like, well, they're surviving. But when you're down as many people as we are, you're not putting the same level of service out to the community. You don't have the same amount of trials that are going to take place. And the system suffers when that happens. And it's true throughout the county. We want to have fully staffed county attorneys, public defender, and legal defenders' offices. But again, we appreciate everything that the board has done. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Smith. Any questions for Attorney Smith? Thank you, sir. Supervisor Martin, thank you.
I do have one. We were told that there's 900 cases backlogged that haven't been filed or dealt with. Is that still a good number? I mean, it's not a good number, but I mean, is that number?
I don't think it's quite that high right now. I don't have the exact figure up to date, but I think it's more like 600-700. We are working on eliminating that backlog. Now, again, these aren't cases that are like people that are in custody. I mean, they have to be processed within a certain amount of time. You have a certain amount of time to file a felony complaint, a certain amount of time to get somebody into the superior court system, either by preliminary hearing or grand jury indictment. So these aren't people that are in custody. These aren't the absolute most serious cases, but to the victims, they are serious. If it's somebody who's a victim of a theft or even a criminal damage, those people want to get their cases processed.
and you're exactly right, and I don't know about everybody else, but that's what I hear. I hear people out there that said, hey, I was a victim. We know who the guy is, and yet this guy's still walking the street and nothing's happening, and they're frustrated with it. And like I say, I think what you've been trying to do with these bonuses and whatnot, we're kind of right now, I think it's a kind of a spinning wheel process. And, we'd like to see those people, get those cases handled for them, the burglars and the thefts, and you're right on the point about, in the big picture, when we look at it, those people that are victims, this is an important thing with them. And they don't understand about shortages in attorneys and timelines and whatnot. But, like I say, I appreciate what you and your staff are trying to do in getting these cases resolved, because it is frustrating for the people. It's frustrating for us. And, when we talk to crime victims, they call us and say, what's going on? Why don't they do this? Well, we understand it, and we'll try to make sure that they understand what we're doing here in the county level. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Attorney Smith. Appreciate it. We'll move to our department heads. We have several of our department heads here today. Would any of you like to come up to the podium and provide some remarks to the board? Going once, going twice. All right, that brings us to our board discussion with staff. Open it up to the board if they have any remarks. Supervisor Martin, thank you, sir.
Yes, I just want to say this. I've been doing this now about a year and a half, still learning, but I'm going to tell the public here in the county, the department heads, I'm telling you, these people are top notch. We call and present a problem and they handle it. And that's the way professional people do things. And I think the people in Mojave County, they may not understand just how good these people are. We have a lot of great people, and for me, it makes my job a whole lot easier when I can call up somebody in a department and say, hey, I've got this issue, and they say, okay, we'll get on it, and they do. And like I say, from my aspect, I want to personally thank those department heads for being responsible and responding. I know, we hear people talk about being kind of a pain in the rear end to some people, and I know who I am because of what I have to do and what I do. But, these folks out here that are handling that, truly, they're professional. They do a great job. And I can say from the county aspect, I don't think I could ask for a better bunch of people. So thank you very much for what you do for me.
Supervisor Gould, any remarks or comments? Supervisor Borelli, any comments or remarks? No. Supervisor Lettman, if you're still with us, any comments
No, I
or
don't.
remarks?
I lost my
Supervisor Borelli.
No, I have no remarks. I'm just trying to figure out this. I lost my feet again. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Supervisor Lettman, do you have any comments or remarks?
I do. I have a question for our head of information technology, if he's in the...
I think you said you had some questions regarding IT. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I assume Nathan's in.
Yeah, I got Director McDaniels coming down to the podium right now. Thank you. Morning, Nathan. Go ahead, Supervisor Lettman.
Nathan, I have a question. You have a request for an additional FTE for a GIS tech. Okay, and that request was supported by, I think, the sheriff and some other elected officials. Could you explain what that position is and why you need it and what they're going to be doing?
Sure. That budget request is centered around I would say first and foremost, needing some human being redundancy. The county IT department currently has a single GIS coordinator, and he alone is the sole support of our GIS infrastructure. He maintains the core system, the database. He does a lot of QA, QC work. In the county, GIS services are distributed for the most part. The assessor's office maintains parcel layer. Public Works has a GIS person that maintains Centerline, and Development Services has a rural addressing coordinator. So collectively, those people work together to make our GIS what it is. Over the past, I would say, decade in the realm of GIS, the need for GIS support has grown significantly in the realm of 911 and voter registration and recorder functions. So basically what we're looking to do is we're looking to add another human being to the mix that we can share knowledge with and do some knowledge transfer in preparation of a point in time when our existing person leaves. It also puts additional strain on us when we have a single person responsible for something that has such a magnitude of effect for county operations.
Okay, what is the consequence if this position is not filled?
I would say the consequence of not filling this position increases the likelihood that we would have to contract for services in the event that we need work done that we can't do ourselves, especially regarding 911. I believe today the sheriff's office is actually outsourcing some of the 911 GIS work to a consultant today using grant funds.
Okay, so that would lead really to what my question was, final question, which is what's preventing us from using a third-party outsourcing to do this work?
Identification of funding.
I didn't hear his answer, I'm sorry.
Identification of funding, a revenue stream.
Okay,
so, I mean,
that's fair.
If you're going to solve the problem, you can solve it by using a human being on your own team, or you can solve the problem by paying for a professional.
That's always going to exceed what you can do with an employee.
Correct.
Any other questions for?
Correct.
Any other questions for Supervisor Gould? Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that I enjoy seeing the IT director use the term human being. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
You didn't call it human capital? I just want to say thank you to all of you that are a part of this organization, whether you're elected or not. Certainly to our new county manager, thank you for your initial budget message, and I look forward to hearing more of those and watching and helping you as this board partners with you in leading this county. And also to Luke, thank you for all of your service over the years in a very challenging environment. The further away you are from a problem, the easier it appears to solve. And the closer you get into it, it's not that way at all. It's very complex. So you guys do a great job with, there's a lot of work that goes into the budget process, and there's a lot of sacrifices that go into that as well. So just appreciate everybody, and we'll continue to do the best we can with what we have moving forward. Thank you all. Any last remarks before we adjourn? Okay, thank you all for being here today. Have a good day.